You think the worst year to be alive was a plague year. It probably wasn't. It was the year the sun stopped working properly. That sounds dramatic, but the claim is narrower and worse than that. AD 536 did not kill the most people all at once. AD 536 stands out because it damaged the basic things that keep people alive: food, warmth, strength, recovery. Once those start failing, every later disaster gets more dangerous. In 536, Procopius was sitting in Constantinople and describing a sun that gave light without brightness, like an eclipse, for about a year. Not darkness. In a way, something worse. Daylight was still there, but it was weak. It felt wrong. A cloud of sulfur haze blasted high above the rain would do exactly that. The sun still shines, but it comes through dirty air high above the weather. Storms cannot wash that out quickly, so it can stay there far too long. And the eerie part is how survivable that sounds at first. The world does not explode. Cities do not vanish. You can still go outside, still work, and still tell yourself this is just a weird season. People could still function and hope it was temporary, which is why they underestimated it. The sky dims first, then harvests fail, then famine and political stress spread. Ice in Greenland and Antarctica keeps a chemical record of what fell from the sky. Both ice sheets show a big sulfate spike in 536, then another one in 540. Trees keep a second record. Their rings turn thin, and their late summer wood shows brutal cold. Pine records from Northern Europe show something even stranger. Plants were not just cold, they were starved of sunlight. Summers got colder across the hemisphere and crops started failing. The Northern Hemisphere cooled by more than 2 degrees at the peak. Europe got summer drops of about 2.5 degrees in 536, then even worse in 540. Tree records from the Alps, Scandinavia, and Inner Asia make 536 the coldest single year in 2,000 years. And 536 to 545 looks like the coldest decade. A couple of degrees does not sound dramatic. Crops do not care. Crops hear that and die. Plants run on 2 things you cannot fake: light and season length. Cut the sunlight, shorten the summer, or drop frost into the wrong week, and that's enough. A farm does not need fireballs from the sky to fail. It just needs the weather to be a little off, over and over, at exactly the wrong moments.
Cassiodorus gives you the ground-level version in Italy in 538. He describes a bluish sun. He says noon cast no shadows. He says the heat was weak and the seasons were all mixed up. Then he gets to the part that matters. Frost hit at harvest. Grapes soured. Apples hardened. And in the same breath, he is dealing with famine relief. The pale sky weakened warmth and threw off harvest timing first. Then people got hungry. Northern Chinese records from 536 and 537 describe severe famine in Guangdong, with mortality so bad the chroniclers put it at 70 to 80%, and cannibalism turns up in the record. Another chronicle reports frost and snow in July and August of 537 in Qingzhou, right in the season when crops are supposed to be growing, not being suddenly frozen like leftovers in a bad freezer. One report even mentions a yellow ash-like substance falling from the sky in winter 536. That sounds bizarre. It also fits a volcanic haze spreading across half the planet. This was not one region having a bad season. Multiple food systems were failing under the same dimmed sky. Mediterranean orchards, Chinese grain regions, northern farms already living near the edge of what their summers could support. Different regions all depended on crops that now got less light and warmth, and once the harvest gets hit, everything after that starts to wobble. Prices rise, reserves disappear, animals get slaughtered early because you cannot feed them, people eat seed grain because being hungry now feels better than starving later, right up until it doesn't. Repeated bad harvest years wipe out reserves, so even a small extra failure becomes hunger right away. Recovery never really starts because the atmosphere gets hit again. A lot of disasters become survivable if the bad year ends and the next year is normal. The next year did not recover because the sky was hit again. Around 539 or 540, a second huge eruption blasted more sulfur high above the rain. Ilopango, in what is now El Salvador, is one of the leading candidates for that second blow. It was a VEI 7 eruption, big enough to bury huge areas nearby and leave sulfur and polar ice far away. New dating on trees buried by that eruption puts it right in the window. So just when farms and states might have started to recover, the atmosphere got another load of junk that blocked sunlight. One eruption damaged harvests, then a second eruption kept the cooling going before farms could recover.
And this is the part that should actually unsettle you. What if the worst year in history is not the one that kills the most people right away, but the one that leaves everyone easier to kill afterward? Because the famous plague years arrive after this. By 541 to 543, the Justinianic plague is ripping through the Eastern Roman world. Bubonic plague is terrible on its own. Nobody needs a dim sun to make plague awful. But plague does not arrive in a vacuum. It arrives in populations that had already had years of colder summers, weaker harvests, hunger, and stress. Better-fed people resist disease better. Stable states move food better, and working farms rebuild losses better. Strip away that safety first, and the same epidemic hits a far more exhausted target. Southern Norway gives a very clean little version of that bigger story. After roughly 3 degrees of cooling, the places most likely to lose enough warmth for farming are northern and western districts. That is exactly where the later evidence shows land use pulling back and farms being abandoned. Not everywhere, not all at once, just the places where the new climate no longer worked for farming. 536 stands out because it damaged food, health, and recovery before the later body count years arrived. Now, the honest answer is, we still do not know how many people 536 itself killed. No clean global death toll exists. Historians do not say the volcanic shock alone caused the Justinianic plague, or every migration, riot, and collapse that followed. The exact source of the first 536 eruption is still debated, and some regions adapted better than others. But the broad picture is solid. The sky dimmed, summers cooled, plants got less light, harvest failed in multiple regions, hunger spread. Then later disasters landed on populations that were already weaker. Historians keep coming back to 536 because the climate shock shows up before the famine, plague, and abandonment. The world of 541 was not the same world that entered 536. The plague years are more famous, but 536 had already weakened harvests and populations before plague arrived. So the worst year to be alive may not be the year history makes loud. Maybe it was the year the sky went wrong, or the year the harvest went wrong, or the year the bodies came later. AD 536 was not the biggest burst of death. It was the year that poisoned the basic conditions of life itself.